it's absolutely true that the people who run the world are terrified and confused and don't know what to do. I was listening to a discussion today where David McWilliams was describing Angela Merkel, you know, the Prime Minister of Germany, as somebody who really is, you know, trying to push through an agenda, and she's uncertain about what the outcome is going to be. Now, if she's uncertain, do you think Enda Kenny, her sidekick, knows to hell what he's doing, or even less so, Eamon Gilmore? But they're bringing us down this road and bringing us into an agenda where the expectation for the parents, the young parents of today, will be that their children will have a much worse life in terms of education, health, jobs, prospects, owning their own home than we're having, or indeed than our parents had. That things are actually rapidly deteriorating in terms of the expectation for working people. So I think really at this stage we have no choice but to fight. And that fight shouldn't be seen as a chore, it should be seen as something absolutely positive and potentially victorious for us. So from tonight I would just like people to relate to the idea that there are all these movements. They shouldn't be seen as separate, they should be brought together, and within that the question of political organisation. We have the People Before Profit Alliance in this area with 2 councillors and a TD, and through that we try to broaden out a radical left that can enthuse and excite people, that doesn't dictate to them, that doesn't tell them how to do what they do, but gives them their head and gives them the materials with which to fight back. And we want to see that blossom and mushroom. And I want to back up what Kieran said. Socialists are important because socialists network, they create a core of people who are trying to understand the system and at the same time fight it, and they get things done. They motivate and move out into the community and get things done, or at least begin to initiate stuff that then takes off, and the household tax campaign is a great example of it. Final word on the household tax campaign: don't be surprised if you get a nasty threatening letter from Phil Hogan's department over the next while. If you do, get in touch with us immediately. We have leaflets and posters ready to go, and we'll be moving into the second phase of the campaign, which is organising a whole range of other protests and big local meetings again in all of the areas in Inchicore, Bluebell, Ballyfermot, Drumna, all of the inner city, all the areas that are affected by it. And I just want to thank you all for coming, and I hope we have a good discussion and take some conclusions from the meeting. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much to both the speakers there. We had a worldwide perspective from Kieran and Brid, brought it back to kind of local issues that affect us here in this constituency, and I'm aware we're spread out from the constituency, which is great. We'll be very interested to get the different point of views from different sides of the constituency in relation to how, as Brid says, we go on to fight, because absolutely we have no choice but to fight. And as Kieran says, we are still learning, so it'd be great to get some input from the floor as to how people think that fight, what format that fight should take. So I'm going to open to the floor. If the panel members don't know an answer, they have the option to phone a friend. So if anyone has the Wexford area code, so listen, please feel free to put your hands up and forward in the questions. Don't be shy. There's no silly questions whatsoever. Yeah, first in, come on, give us a blast and air out.
Well, I think the trade unions are mostly to blame for the working class situation here in this society. They've totally let people down. They've marched us up a hill, back down again. And I think the fight predominantly should be taken to the trade unions. They are the ones, they're there to represent the working class people. We know Fine Gael is not there to represent us, but they have been appointed, they've lost their grassroots, they have to be taken on, shaken down and basically taken on. I think that's the first port to call anyway, if you're talking about changing the working class situation, because we've nobody to represent us anymore. We're on our own now, aside from the socialists, of course. But I think that's the first port to call, that something should be organised there, and especially to take on SIP, to one of the biggest trade unions in the country. 200,000 members are just being ignored in the workforce. And
thanks very much for that. I'm sure we'll address that later on as well. There's a lot of questions in relation to that.
Oh yeah. I thought the very same way as that woman, that like we talk about the trade unions, but we never do anything about it. Like we march to the door, but we don't march to SIP to. Like if I had my way, I'd be throwing stones at the window. they're very hard to replace them. I know that from years ago. So how do we kind of get a root branch sort of thing to get really up in through the structure, or can we smash it completely?
Very good point, very good point. We'll address that as well. Any more questions there before we go?
United Left Alliance, just unfortunately, there's a meeting on at the moment of the Dublin 12 ULA People-for-Profit branch, but I think it's really important that nobody leaves here tonight who isn't a member of the United Left Alliance, who, like, we had a big defeat in that referendum, but at the same time, between us and Sinn Féin, two very small organisations politically, we really punched above our weight and had a huge effect. I think, within the United Left Alliance, I'm in Socialist Workers' Party myself, and there are the other groups. There's the Socialist Party and there's the Tipperary, workers not employed. And I just feel, that now is the time that we need to all be in there politically.
Any more questions? One more.
No, it was just to come back on what Ruth was saying, just about, I suppose people traditionally look to the trade union movement for leadership, and like it's been, I suppose it's very demoralising, and it's been very, like people have drawn their own conclusions, and other people say it more eloquently than I do. But I think one of the benefits of that lack of leadership has been that I suppose that realisation that, or the hope. I think in the past people always hoped that somebody else would do the fighting for us. It might have been the shop steward, or it might have been the official, or it might have been somebody else, or it was the bargaining agreement, or it was partnership. And all that's gone. And I think that there's been a phase, or been a situation where it's kind of been a bit of fear and demoralisation, and like, can we really do it ourselves? And I think that, like as Brid was saying, and as Kieran was saying, like, well, actually, that we've worked out that phase. We've gone through that, and we've realised that if they're not going to do it for us, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And I think the really good thing about the success of the campaign against the household tax has shown, yeah, well, actually we can. We can do it. Like that demonstration onto the Fine Gael Ardèche, I have to say, I was filming it, and when I went up, I was so annoyed. And the reason why I was annoyed was because I was there. I should have been there a half hour earlier. It was so big, I didn't know how to deal with it, from that perspective. And it was a huge success. And to hear everybody going down saying, "Phil Hogan, here we come," it frightened the out of them completely. So it's about having the confidence and knowing that yes, we can do it. We can get small victories out of them, and who knows, we might get big victories out of them, but we won't know unless we fight. And that little sentence that Brid said, it's not a chore. This is something that we have to do. And I think before now we've kind of seen, fighting back as a chore, but now we know it's not. It's something that we have to celebrate, and we have to bring as many people along with us as possible, because that's the only way that we're going to win.
Thank you. Just hold on, I'm going to just address those couple of questions about the trade union, and we may go on again. But I'm going to ask Kieran just to come in and answer that. There was 4 questions there, basically related to how we, as a small way, utilise the trade union movement. So Kieran's going to address that.
Well, the first thing to say absolutely is that people should be a member of a union. Although we're giving out about Jack O'Connor and so on, like, everybody should be a member of a union. A union means sticking together, and it means one for all and all for one. So that basic philosophy is very important. I suppose the second thing to say is, although I hate Jack O'Connor, I don't hate the man, I hate what he does, but he's not the main enemy. The main enemy are IBEC, the employers, and so on, right? The employers in this country, the IBEC, the organisation, sat, I can tell you exactly when they did it, in February 2008, as soon as the recession started, they said, we are setting as our objective to cut wages by 10%. Right? And they were tougher in Ireland than Britain, France and so on, and they drove through these wage cuts. First of all in the public sector, and then in the private sector. The problem we have with union leaders is they're cowards. They don't know how to fight, they won't organise a fight, and they're too frightened to take it to the employers. So the employers are being tough, and we have these characters who are tied in with the Labour Party, and they won't fight back properly. So it's important to see it. The main enemy is still the employer, rather than the union. Now, how do you go about changing your union? I mean, Sheila's absolutely right. As the unions have got quieter and quieter, often the people who get on the committees are the hacks. They're in it because you can get away for a day to a conference. What sort of conference expenses in situ again?
It's £200 at this stage, yeah.
A day.
Well, over the period of the week,
Two,
you
so you
get
get what,
plus
two-
your lodgings and whatever. Yeah.
So people are in it for that sort of thing. They're on it to, that's the way it's become, unfortunately, in some parts, not all, right, but some parts, right? So what you have to do is, you have to start not so much on these committees, but where you work, right? And the most important thing is talking to your fellow workers and saying, listen, we have to have a decent shop steward. Because if we don't have a decent shop steward that stands up for us, we'll get rolled over. So you get people together and you get yourself a decent representative. The second thing you do is you make sure that they never go into the employer without coming back to you and telling you exactly what happened. And they always got to come back to you and take the mandate from you. That's really important. Now, I'm a shop steward, and sometimes I urge people in UCD we have to fight, and they disagree with me. They say, listen, we can't do it. But I have to accept that. That's democracy, right? And it works both ways. So you always have to have a good shop steward, and the most important thing about a good shop steward is they stay in touch with the members, even when the members sometimes disagree or agree with the shop steward. Very important that. And lastly then, in terms of how that's where it starts really. It just starts in your own job, getting people organised and so on. I suppose two last quick things. I mean, taking petitions around, asking to join the Labour Party. Sorry, not the petition. long day. Asking people to stop contributing to the Labour Party. Stop contributing to the Labour Party. That's how you get things going in the job. Very lastly, Paul might say a word about it. We have groups like Change SIP2 going, where anybody who's in SIP2 and you want to bring about a change, and we've got to get a move on it more afterwards. We have about, what, 10, 20 shop stewards who want to bring about a change in SIP2.
We have a circle down in Galway at the minute, and there's a branch coming up in Limerick. The unions are terrified of this because they do know that once this gets out, I understand that there's people here who've been involved in a couple of campaigns already which are very successful and have produced results. Very simple thing, grassroots people saying, listen, we're not happy with the way SIP2 is coming out, not coming out against the household charge, not coming out against the treaty. I mean, you know, who decided that Jack O'Connor should say, oh yes, this is a great treaty, yes, we should vote, yes, you know, so we're saying, you know, it should be representative of people's views. People should go forward, take up positions within their union, as shop steward, as activists. You don't have to be shop steward, you can be active in the unions without doing that. And just from a grassroots point of view, put your case forward to the leadership. Yes, we should be challenging the leadership every time they speak and put forward the wrong decision. Kieran spoke about the conference. It's very hard when you're getting up. The people delegated to go to the conference, again, are the party hacks. You wouldn't put a legitimate complaint forward. My members did this. You're laughed off the stage. These are Jack O'Connor's buddies. Getting that 200. Now, by the way, I didn't pay tax on that 200 quid I got, so anybody take that, delete that, right? But that's what you're up against, and that is the problem. We need the grassroots to stand up to our shop stewards, to our representatives, and to our leadership. And as I say, Change SIP2 is a very good way of doing that. There are other public service alliances and all sorts of stuff that feed into that. I'm aware that there's mentioned the other day, we'll come back to that later on in the discussion. There's two shown